Colorado has come full circle in the pandemic. Like, not in a good way, as in we're arguing about the same stuff we were a year ago. A family, forever altered by COVID-19 last year, has the simplest of requests for all of us. This family was built, not born. They're stepping in to help each other succeed through school despite their common challenge.
Oh man, I would have been out of here. I would have been out of here already.
Last week, you raised an astonishing amount of money for those impacted by Boulder's mass shooting. Tonight, let's talk about how we can help the majority of Colorado's crime victims who don't receive that kind of attention and support. Next. Year 2 of the pandemic, and we are back to arguing over one of the original issues in Colorado, whether a statewide mask mandate prevents confusion and protects Coloradans, or whether a county-by-county approach can get the job done. State's hinting it's going to be the county's call in a couple of weeks now. Our Steve Steger talked to some public health leaders.
When Colorado hands over more power to local governments, Governor Jared Polis hinted some of that power might include whether or not to continue to make masks mandatory. The statewide mandate is set to expire this weekend.
We're likely to have about a 2-week extension of that mask order to get us to that point where we more formally devolve the authority.
Continuing the mask mandate for a while longer makes a lot of sense.
Dr. John Douglas leads the Tri-County Health Department. He says if he had his way, masks would stay mandatory statewide to avoid confusion.
One of the things we've heard is that inconsistency is our enemy, and having inconsistent guidelines in different places can be really confusing and probably reduces overall compliance.
Douglas says keeping masks around will actually help us achieve more normalcy more quickly.
If we are going to relax capacity restrictions in the community, which I think we should, and we do have variants circulating, which we do, it makes to me a whole lot of sense to continue it till we're really sure we've gotten our vaccination as good as we can get it.
We're working hard to keep our in-person learning in our schools. That is really a goal of ours as a community and as a state.
Larimer County's health director, Tom Gonzalez, says preventing community transmission keeps schools open.
We believe face covering should be, an order should be in effect till May 30th to get us through the school year and while we're vaccinating everyone as fast as we can.
I think it has been the most cost-effective prevention measure we have used.
For Douglas, the best way to keep people compliant is for the order to come from the top.
The governor likes to say, you know, I don't really care if we have a law or not, but if you need me to say that it's required, then that's fine. I'll say you're required. I think he's underestimating the power of his bully pulpit.
A lot of local health departments told me today that they are going to wait for guidance from the state, likely this weekend, to see whether or not they'll need to implement their own mask mandates in the next couple of weeks. We reached out to the governor's office to try to get a response from the governor to this input from public health leaders. We haven't heard back just yet, Kyle.
And maybe I'm thinking a step ahead, Steve, but I hope that we don't get back to the point that we were at maybe this time last year, where a lot of the burden was falling on frontline employees. I think of grocery store workers, other retail employees who are getting just screamed at and abused by people who say, I don't have to wear a mask, it's not a statewide thing.
Yeah, because the argument from these county health officials is that it's easier for people to cross county lines and not know capacity limits, things like that for restaurants. Like, that's easier for the consumer to get. But crossing county lines and knowing when and where to put a mask on, that's something pretty crucial, and it can get awfully confusing awfully quickly.
Steve, thank you. More than 1 million people in Colorado have now completed the vaccination process. How about that? That's more than 17% of our state population. 11.3% of the state's waiting on a second dose, and they're in gray. That's the 20% that cannot get the vaccine because they are too young. You asked for the gray, we got you the gray. 320 people are currently hospitalized with COVID-19 in our state. We're down 9 patients from yesterday, but up from this time last week. A more manageable single-day positivity rate came in yesterday, just over 4%. We had 2 really high days, like out of nowhere. That spike brought our 7-day weekly average for tests coming back positive to 4.3%. Brian Garrett loved his job, drove patients to their medical appointments. 1 year ago, he started feeling sick. He self-isolated, ended up in the hospital. And Brian Garrett became one of the Coloradans lost to COVID-19. His family has been permanently changed. They shared their wish with our Anusha Roy that everyone do an act of kindness in Brian's memory.
He had a huge heart, was a big family person, a wonderful father, and it's Brian Garrett's kindness that his family hopes others will emulate.
When we reached out to his wife and talked to her about it, her response was, "We just need more kindness." After the year we had.
It was early in the pandemic when he started to show symptoms of COVID. His family said goodbye to him over an iPad that nurses in the hospital held up for him. A year later, his wife came up with an idea to honor her husband.
She wanted people just to do something nice for somebody, whether it's pay for somebody in the drive-thru behind them or reach out to somebody, just call your grandparents. Just a really good idea of something to remember Brian by.
It's because that's how Brian lived his life. He meant so much to the people he picked up on the way to their medical appointments.
Reached out to me and just told me how much they loved and respected Brian because of the service he provided and how much he cared for the people that he was helping.
He carried that kind of compassion throughout his life.
He would just do anything for anybody and just loved everybody. Everybody described him as a gentle giant because he was 6'4", big guy.
And after the year Brian's family had, they are thinking about the rest of us living through the pandemic, saying they know people are tense and tired and hope thinking about Brian will remind people to have some patience and kindness.
So you heard Brian's family talking about, your act of kindness could be just talking to a family member you haven't seen in a while. And they said that for a reason. And it's because Brian's family has been grieving separately over the last year. They haven't been seeing each other in person to be as COVID safe as possible and have been supporting each other through texts and emails and whatever felt the safest for that family. They were talking today, Kyle, about how some of them have now started getting vaccinated, including some family members who have their first doses that are going to be due tomorrow.
Grief and loss, one more way that the burdens of the pandemic were not shared equally among Coloradans. Brian, he was honored as a healthcare worker who was lost in the pandemic.
Yeah, that's actually one of the ways we first learned about Brian as we were trying to learn more about the healthcare workers we've lost over the last year. And Kaiser actually paired up with The Guardian and started putting together profiles of healthcare workers that died during the pandemic online. It's through a whole bunch of different sources, but they've been putting together profiles that you can read through, learn, and honor the people who lost their lives.
We respect what those families have lost by remembering. Thank you, Anusha. The Boulder County Crisis Fund, short and long-term help for those impacted by the mass shooting, has now passed $1 million in total fundraising. I raised that today because you all accounted for more than a quarter of the dollars raised for that fund, and you were more than 2/3 of the individual donors. That's the power when a lot of people get together to give what they can. So what do you say we do it again this week? Only focus this time on the majority of crime victims in Colorado who, of course, don't receive public attention and support. Our Word of Thanks microgiving project this week supports a longtime nonprofit that has the ability to quickly help crime victims with emergency needs, things like groceries and phone bills. The names of crime victims line the walls at the nonprofit Colorado Organization for Victim Assistance. Most of those names would not be familiar to us. Their cases were not in the news, so strangers aren't as likely to reach out to help. There are state and federal victims assistance funds, but COVA keeps a small emergency fund of its own to help out when that other assistance is going to be too slow in coming or too limited to be able to immediately help a crime victim in Colorado. Victims advocates are the ones who apply for these funds on behalf of their clients, so you know it's all legit. And COVA can turn around emergency help for crime victims in 20 minutes if that's what's needed. Like to get a car out of impound so somebody can go to work, to get a phone bill paid, to repair property damage, get somebody a gift card for gas or groceries, whatever that family needs. These victims advocates work all across our state. They are there for people in the worst moments in their lives when they can not only feel victimized, but forgotten. Text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. I will send you that link to donate. As always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5. This is our chance to show victims of crime in Colorado stuff that does not make the evening news, that we stand with them as well. Quick quiz. 1 year ago today, were we wearing masks yet or not? Strange how time stretches and compresses during the pandemic. Their achievements are no accident for a group at CSU.
We're a very diverse population that seeks to, make sure we give a helping hand whenever we can.
Independent students who don't always have a support system at home band together to succeed. Next. Some judicial precedents are clearly worth overturning, like in 1998 when Colorado's Supreme Court dispensed with its entire history's worth of precedent of having male chief justices and selected Mary Malarkey for the role. The longest-serving Chief Justice in Colorado history has passed away at the age of 77. She was appointed to the Colorado Supreme Court in 1987 by Governor Roy Romer, only the second woman to serve on the court and intent on opening doors for other women to follow her into the judicial branch. She oversaw the court from 1998 to 2010, while she was also battling multiple sclerosis. Court released a statement today calling Chief Justice Malarkey, quote, an inspiration to countless women who admired her tenacity in overcoming barriers in the legal profession. It continued, quote, a powerful early advocate for diversity in the legal profession, including our courts, and her hard work forged a lasting legacy in Colorado. March 31st, 2020. We still were not wearing masks in public. It's been a year. First few weeks of the pandemic, guidance from the national health experts was that there was not a need to wear a mask out in public if you were healthy. The scientists were learning along the way, which is not a conspiracy. That's how science works. A year ago today is when that message really seemed to change, both from the CDC and the White House.
The reason that the White House may be asking us to put masks on everyone is for those asymptomatic people that may be expelling those droplets to minimize the expulsion of those droplets. So it's more those people that don't have symptoms or are minimally symptomatic that seem to be spreading this virus to minimize how many viral particles they're expelling, rather than really to be protecting the people that are healthy or the people that are vulnerable from getting infected with the virus.
A little more than a month later, City of Denver issued a public health order requiring masks in public. Boulder and Wheat Ridge also had issued their own mandates by the beginning of May. The governor said repeatedly he did not want to do a statewide mask mandate, wanted counties to handle it. Sound familiar? Wait until mid-July of 2020 for that statewide order. As we talked about at the top of the program, it's still in place for at least another few weeks. Hey, we are getting some feedback on our coverage of the return to Red Rocks. Josh was one of several Next viewers asking about shows that people already have tickets for, stuff that had been postponed, shows that will now be capped at 25% capacity. So for popular shows, that means if the show goes on, if the act's still willing to come and play for the smaller crowd, everybody with a ticket won't be able to go. Here's the deal. Red Rocks told us today that should not be an immediate problem because the first shows on the schedule, when the capacity will be the lowest, those are newly booked shows. The really popular stuff that was postponed from 2020 is being rescheduled now for 2022, when hopefully the capacity restriction will be lifted.
A nice way to end our snowiest month on average with sunshine and a warming trend. Temperatures in the 50s this afternoon. We go even warmer tomorrow. Yesterday's storm is tracking off to the east. High pressure will keep the storm track to the north, and all the heavy rain and real travel issues will be across the eastern third of the nation. So in Denver for tonight, enjoy fair skies and 27. Tomorrow, sunny, almost 70 for the Rockies home opener. And we have beautiful weather heading into the upcoming holiday weekend on Easter Sunday. A temperature close to 80 degrees. We may be in record territory. Next storm and chance for cooler, wet weather comes in late Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. Enjoy.
Getting into college is half the battle. Staying there is the next test.
Would not be here, period. I would not be here. I would be back in my bellow doing whatever I would be doing in my bellow. So,
a support system for students who may not have one of their own back home. Next. Colleges offer all kinds of programs trying to help students feel a sense of community. They want it to be a home away from home. For students without what we think of as a traditional support system at home, that becomes even more vital. Our Mike Grady shows us CSU's Fostering Success program.
The uncertainty of a college campus can be unsettling.
It's like a culture shock coming here when you're, especially as an independent student.
Devontae Tobe
Hello.
is an independent student at Colorado State University.
Graduating in the fall. I love saying that part.
These undergrads navigate college without traditional family support systems.
Not only do they have to pay for school, but they also have to make sure that they figure out ways to get food on the table, make sure they keep a roof over their head. This right here is our first ever Fostering Success Program's food and paint.
In 2010, CSU started the Fostering Success program to support kids like Devontae through mentoring, building community, and also financially.
I wasn't going to receive any financial support from my family. I lived with my grandparents, and I wasn't expecting to get anything from them, and then me and my mom, I wasn't expecting to get anything from them, and I definitely wasn't expecting to get anything from my dad because I don't, associate with him.
Devontae hesitated to rely on FSP.
When I got up here, I wasn't, I'm from Montbello. I didn't feel like I needed nobody.
Now he works as a mentor, keeping events like this going through the pandemic.
You want to be able to be in a room with people that have a similar story as you.
Despite the typical unknowns facing a graduating senior, Devontae is certain this community got him this far.
Oh man, I would have been out of here. I would have been out of here already. I would have been out of here, no doubt.
For Next, I'm Mike Grady.
I really appreciate y'all coming out and kicking it with me for a little bit.
Devontae says that he hopes to return to Montbello to work in the community he grew up in as a high school English teacher. And my thanks to the next viewer on Twitter who a couple months ago suggested that we look into the Fostering Success program. Always welcome your suggestions about Colorado's interesting people and places and groups like that. We have all seen the power that we have as a community when we rally together around victims of mass violence like we did in Boulder. Can't forget the crime victims in Colorado who don't get the public attention or the support. Because this week, they're getting that support from us. That's next. You raised an astonishing $290,000 for those impacted by the mass shooting in Boulder last week. This week, we're talking about the fact that most of Colorado's crime victims do not get that kind of attention, support, headlines. You can help meet their emergency needs through this week's Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. If you text the word thanks to 303-871-1491, I will send you that link to join me and a bunch of other good folks in donating to the emergency fund for crime victims that's run by victims advocates at the nonprofit Colorado Organization for Victim Assistance. Victims advocates are the ones who apply for this emergency help on behalf of their clients when traditional victims assistance funds are going to be too slow, too limited, any other roadblocks. These are people whose stories rarely make the news, yet they are also struggling with short-term and long-term needs after becoming victims of crime. And together, we can help them out. Ralph writes in tonight to say that stores, businesses are private companies. Ralph says if they would kick people out for not wearing masks on their property, then that would send a message. It absolutely would send a message, Ralph, but remember where we were last year where you had frontline grocery workers who were getting spat on and yelled at by people. So that's the tension point. Who has to be that tension point? Maggie says, you look skinny. Are you okay? Remember that game we played during the pandemic when you guessed how much weight I had gained?